Hello everyone, this is Bobbin Threadbare and welcome back to Weaving Worlds. Today's video is another in the series of deep dives on fantasy races, alien species, and monsters, with the goal being to show you how you can use these classic creatures while incorporating your own unique spin. Last time I discussed elves, a common sight in fantasy stories, and so for this video I decided to switch to an equally common sight in science fiction stories: gray aliens. What is a gray alien? Humans have been obsessed with the idea of extraterrestrial aliens ever since we realized that planets were solid objects just like Earth, and arguably even before then. However, we have no idea what could live on an alien world, and so we've invented all kinds of strange creatures to inhabit them. A few such creations have captured the public's imagination, and perhaps the most widely used creation is the gray alien, also known simply as a gray. Greys first became known as such after the widely publicized and widely debunked Barney and Betty Hill abduction story, which didn't really prove that aliens exist and can wipe human minds, so much as it proved that hypnosis is better at making subjects suggestible than it is at pulling out genuine memories. Nevertheless, while the archetype of the cold but intelligent alien creature existed before the Hill abduction report in 1965, the event was what gave the world the term gray alien and popularized them in paranormal circles. It then went on to become an archetype within fiction, thanks to the stories that drew from this modern mythology. Generally speaking, a gray's physical features are as follows. They have an oversized head, no hair, large eyes, and small or non-existent facial features. Their bodies can be of any height, but tend towards being thin and frail, and they are otherwise humanoid in shape. Mentally, greys tend to be intelligent but unemotional, and any exceptions to this personality type are usually meant to be exceptions and not expansions of the archetype. As for reproduction, greys are ascribed a variety of options like cloning and factory production, but in general these aliens are portrayed as asexual and aromantic. Hidden observers. Because greys are based on a real-world paranormal myth, they tend to be used by writers who want to convey the idea that aliens know about Earth, but for some reason they don't want to make direct contact with us. The reason they don't want to contact us depends entirely on the author, but I would say that you probably shouldn't add greys to your setting unless you also want to add that question: why are they watching us? And there are a lot of different directions you can take that question. Is it our fault? Are humans too violent or too primitive to unleash on galactic society? Or are greys simply xenoanthropologists, and informing us of alien life forms would ruin their observations? Or what if greys have already infiltrated humanity? Maybe they've been guiding human civilization for millennia. Or maybe they're infiltrating the highest levels of society so they can conquer our planet with the least amount of destruction necessary. Why are they watching us is a question with 1,000 answers, and it's the reason why so many science fiction works use greys. Greys as psychics. Because greys are a paranormal myth, it's fairly common for works that invoke them to also invoke other paranormal myths like psychic powers. Greys are supposed to be smart, inhuman, and advanced after all, so why not also give them a paranormal superpower? Especially when psychic powers can solve so many problems. There's no language barrier if greys can speak telepathically, their frail bodies are no hindrance if they can move objects with telekinesis, and they can remove exactly the memories they need to if they have direct access to your mind. Greys as brutal invaders. One reason greys might avoid human notice is because they are the scouts or the vanguard of an invading army. They abduct humans, cattle, and other animals to learn how best to kill us, and how best to use our genetic traits to benefit their empire. The reason they wipe the memories of their victims and put them back where they came from is to avoid drawing attention to themselves, and making sure that humans are completely unaware and unprepared for the invasion once it arrives. The XCOM video game series is an example of this approach. Greys, known as sectoids within the setting, are the first species to invade the Earth, and they act as scouts and scientists rather than shock troops. You also see this in the film Independence Day, in which the Roswell incident is a crashed alien scout ship that arrived several decades ahead of the main invasion force. This approach is best when you want to draw clear lines between each side of a conflict, and you would rather tell stories about war and fighting over stories about spies and infiltration. The Greys were being quiet at some point in the past, but right now the war is starting, and it's us or them. Greys as underhanded infiltrators. Another reason the Greys might be watching us from the shadows is because they already rule the world in secret, and if that secret were uncovered, it would disrupt the status quo. The methods the Greys use to control society depend entirely on what abilities and technologies you give them. Maybe the Greys are shapeshifters who can take on human form, and they either manipulate human psychology to take over, or they abduct key figures and replace them with alien doppelgangers. Maybe they have a giant mind control device that forces humans to do their bidding or hides them from view, and once the protagonist destroys it, their schemes will be revealed for all to see. This approach is a good way to tell tense stories about intrigue and espionage. It's also a way you can use aliens as a stand-in for the class divide. The upper class is so completely removed from the struggles of the working class that they're literally a different species from us. Greys as unemotional scientists. Perhaps the Greys' motive for staying concealed and abducting humans is nothing more complicated than a science expedition. They abduct humans to study our biology and obtain samples in a controlled environment, and they avoid revealing themselves so as not to alter our native habitat. And that is how to operate a proper expedition. You want as much information as possible while leaving the minimum possible impact. And if some abductees have regained some memories or impressions of their confinement, well, that just proves that Greys aren't infallible either. You should use this approach if you want to tell a story with a low-stakes conflict. The Greys don't want anything from humans aside from what they're already getting, and so if humans discover them and make demands, they'll probably agree to them. Why not? You can also use this approach if you'd rather center your conflict on something other than the Greys. Maybe the Greys are just one alien species that's interacting with Earth. Or maybe the main conflict is between different human factions, who have different ideas on what to do now that alien life is confirmed. Greys as shipwrecked survivors. According to the legend of the Roswell incident, it wasn't just a spaceship that the farmers around Roswell spotted, it was the ruins of a crashed spaceship. So, what if the Greys are keeping a low profile because they're stuck here on Earth? What if they're avoiding attention because otherwise they'd get captured by the government and vivisected? Or maybe they're already in government custody and the protagonist has to bust them out. This approach is a good way to humanize Greys, at least to whatever extent they resemble humans. The number of aliens in this scenario is low, and because they're isolated, they have to rely on humans if they want to accomplish anything. Or you could take the horror movie approach by making the Grey survivors incredibly powerful and incredibly hostile, and the goal of the protagonists is to kill or capture them before they have a chance to contact the rest of their species. One last thing to consider is what technology level you want the humans to be at in your setting. A modern technology level works well because the Grey myth was invented in the modern era, but some versions of the story have Greys visiting Earth hundreds or thousands of years ago. And so maybe you want to tell a story about ancient aliens. You could also bring the setting into the future. Maybe the Greys are observing now but will take action in 50 years. Or maybe your setting is a full-on space opera that takes place hundreds of years into the future, and Greys are just one alien species among the dozens or hundreds that humans have contacted. In fact, maybe the Greys are the aliens that introduced humans to the galactic community. Thanks for joining me again for today's journey into weaving worlds. Please like, share, and subscribe because that raises my visibility here on YouTube. Check out my other stuff if you have some time, support me on Patreon if you have some money, and I hope I'll see you again for the next video.